Hey, what's up, workforce? Brian here, and we're going to be talking about a video that Meoni put out talking about the problem with the item level cheese when it comes to the Alliance Roulette in Final Fantasy XIV. Now, Meoni reached out to me personally and asked if I could kind of weigh in on the subject because there's just a lot of really great comments that are going on his video, and you should absolutely go watch his video. In fact, the link will be one of the top links in the description of this video, as well as you should definitely go subscribe to Meoni. He is amazing. I love his content so very much, and honestly, I hope that we can help get him to 100,000 subscribers this year. So it's let's make it happen, workforce. Let's be sure to do that and continue to support him and all the effort that he puts into his videos. But I want to talk about it because he asked me to talk about it. So this is a response to his video. And just kind of a heads up warning, it's going to have some opinions that you may or may not agree with. And that's perfectly okay. Let me know what you think about my thoughts, because honestly, I'm going to kind of give you a preview right now. While this isn't scripted, I think it's going to go in a different direction than anybody expects, because I've been putting a lot of thought into this, not necessarily with the item level cheese, but it kind of plays into something that I've been talking about for a while here on the channel, and I'm going to use this as a way of kind of taking that thought and applying it to this situation. So I'm going to go ahead and let Meoni kind of set the context. In his video, he talks about what the item level cheese is. So here's what he had to say.
It's very easy to pull this off. As you can see, you just unequip pretty much everything down to your birthday suit and some old low-level item ring or something, and then just simply queue. Boom, it's one of the old raids. All you need to do is get to an average item level of around 70 or just a bit higher, which is literally impossible for a level 80 to do so without unequipping everything. We then just re-equip our gear with one of our buttons or in the gear selection menu, and we're back up to our synced parameters like everyone else that's queued here normally. I think the majority of the discomfort then comes from people expecting there to be more variety with the content the Alliance raids could actually pop, as opposed to the same thing each and every time. We actually talked in a previous week about how the frontline roulette became stale and frankly pointless when Square Enix themselves took every other frontline from that roulette and put only Onshal Hakir as the only option to pop.
So for me, it's really hard not to share my love of Final Fantasy XI and Final Fantasy XIV with the world. In fact, if you've been here for any amount of time, that should be readily apparent to you. But there's a bigger conversation to be had, and that's what this video is going to focus on, like I kind of teased a little bit in the intro. So stick with me. But to address the item level cheese, for me, this isn't anything new. I'm a veteran of this game, coming up on 10 years. And when I look at it, human nature is always going to be what human nature is. Is this a problem? Really is going to depend on your perspective. If you're tired of the same old, absolutely. I completely agree with what Meoni said in his video. However, there's an argument to be made regarding time and reward. Why do people feel they need to go ahead and cheese this? Well, it's the same reward, pretty much, and the time is what is different. How do we reduce that variable? Human beings are going to do what is the most efficient. And in this case, the most valuable currency that we all have is time. So my first concern is sometimes it's an old phrase, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because essentially you could go and try to, create ways to kind of manage this system. And do we really need that from the developers? And that's my question to you. If you could answer that in the comments, let me know. Would we rather them spending their time focusing in on this issue? Or would we rather have them focusing in on new content and new systems and that? Because when I look at the current, when I look at the current previous content, that's a horrible phrase. Like I said, not very scripted here. When I look at that, it's that content really hasn't stood the test of time with unsyncing, with, your power levels. Like that content, and especially with Shadowbringers in level 80, it feels that, that content has become a lot easier. And it's easier because they want to get you to the good stuff, to the new stuff, to the exciting stuff, to the things that they're selling in marketing and advertising. And the thing that you're seeing Meoni and different streamers and even us talk about from time to time. So what is the core root of the problem? And I don't blame the humans for doing this. I don't blame anybody who is like, yep, this is what I can do. This is the easiest way for me. And because so many more people are doing it, we're just seeing the same old content over and over again. And again, I'm going to be very clear. Anybody thinks I'm being critical of the game should know, yes, this is critique. It's critique. I love it. You should totally play it. It's an amazing game. What could they do to do better? And this is kind of building up on things that Yoshi P has said multiple times. People have wanted harder level dungeons. People have wanted different level systems. At the end of this expansion, we'll have over 77 dungeons in the game. And yet we still see the only 2 or 3 or 5 dungeons more frequently. And occasionally you might get another one that you haven't seen in a while. And that is truly exciting. I am 100% on board that variety is the spice of life. Variety is actually something that will benefit this game in a big way. The issue isn't the item level sync, it's why do people do it? So for me, the simplest answer would be to start to augment the rewards based off of what raid you get. Therefore, equipping your highest level gear, you're going to get more rewards for your time. And I know that phrase could be or sound dangerous, and it is, because I'm not saying that, oh, you're going to run this highest level thing, and because it took you more time to do it, we're going to give you more rewards. I'm not saying that at all. I'm also not saying that if you run something really quickly, you should get more rewards, because that could only lead to toxicity because people are wanting to do things faster. The root issue isn't the people, it's the system in place, and that is matchmaking. And you should know, I love matchmaking. As a father and somebody who doesn't necessarily always have the most time to play games, matchmaking is a great asset to me. But I think we lose something in our personability. I think we lose something in our working together. And this is where this conversation is going to go at this point. I mentioned Final Fantasy XI at the beginning because one of the channels that I really love also, along with Meoni, is Hunting for Games. Hunter is, he's just an amazing creator. He's put out a lot of really great videos recently talking about like Final Fantasy XI Classic and its party size. And one of the things that Final Fantasy XI and Final Fantasy XIV have both done is the concept of the trust system. Now, I can probably hear some of your groaning within the community, so bear with me because I'm not advocating for the trust system that we have, but I'm telling you about something that is coming sometime, probably in the next couple of years. We've actually already seen it implemented in other games. I'm going to talk about Forza. If you've never heard of this game, it's an amazing racing game. It's one of my favorite. And they do this concept called drivatars. A drivatar is a representation of you when you're not online, when you're not actually playing with your friend. And this is all done through the power of artificial intelligence. And this is one of the things that we're going to start to see really shake up and revolutionize MMOs in the coming decade. But what does that mean for the trust system? And what does that mean for Final Fantasy and these online games? So come on an imagination journey with me just for a second, because like I said, matchmaking isn't the best thing when it comes to building these communities. It can work out, and there are exceptions to that rule. However, you are rolling the dice with the roulette. You're saying, I am rolling the dice, and however the system decides to land on it, that's what we're going to do. That's who I'm going to be with. And sometimes it's a bust. And most of the time it works great and there's no problems. And that's where the illusion comes in that it's a good and positive system, when in reality, I don't think it's so much so. Now, just for context's sake, if you're not familiar with the trust system in Final Fantasy XI, I'm going to start from 14's perspective and I'm going to work my way back. In 14, in the latest expansion, you can choose to run dungeons with NPCs and only NPCs. We asked at the time, can we mix and match? Because it might be fun if I have 2 friends or 3 friends online, and we might just use a trust to kind of fill in that gap if that's what we want to do. And the answer was unfortunately no. It's either NPCs and you or 4 different players, and that's just going to be how it is. Now in 11, it didn't really work out that way. Now 11 doesn't have matchmaking. And that's where a lot of people who look at 11 and look at how they did the jobs and the sub jobs and how they had so much customization and player agency And yes, there was a meta, and yes, there was a right answer, but you didn't necessarily always have to do that. You were in a sandbox. You can kind of go and just kind of choose to do your own thing, and that was primarily okay for the most part. But in 11, they eventually introduced it, and people have their feelings about the trust system in 11 as well, is that you could have friends, and you could also have your trusts. So I could go level with a party of trusts, or my friends get online, I can boot one of the trusts because they're a bot and they don't have feelings, and that's perfectly fine. In fact, trusts in 11 and even in 14 is somewhat a removal of downtime. I want to do something, but I need somebody to do that something with. So here's the pitch. Imagine if your friends were also your trusts. Imagine if, by playing the game, they were training up their own AI so that when you were playing the game, you were playing with them. Now that might seem maybe a little bit science fiction, and I'm happy to say that's actually working in practice. I brought up Forza already, but I've been playing a lot of Phantasy Star Online too, and they have the same system in place. You can play with your friends even if they're not online. Now, the arguments about how that would work, what benefits there should be, what disadvantages there should be, that's all up for grabs. There's nothing wrong with having the debate of how that should work, and I'd love to know your thoughts. In my world, in my opinion, I think it would be really cool to be able to team up with you when you're not online, and when you get off work, you jump in and all of a sudden you're like, yeah, I would like to join Brian in Progress. Absolutely. And where a trust was playing, all of a sudden you're playing. I think that's ultimately very interesting. So how does that work and fit into the situation, obviously, with the item level cheese? Imagine if now you didn't have matchmaking, but there was still 24-man content. In fact, in older MMOs, there were 40-man content and more. We've seen that continue to get smaller and smaller and smaller. In fact, when you even look at the MMO today, Final Fantasy XIV's largest instance is pretty much 72. Now, Eureka is an exception. They definitely got it up higher, which was really exciting to see. But Fortnite's got 100, and it's like, what makes the MMO the MMO? And so when we look at the technology, the AI, the server, and the cloud, we're starting to see new MMOs starting to kind of roll themselves out with 1,000 to 2,000 to 10,000 players, with that being their goal. But how do you group up? How do you solve this problem of matchmaking, just putting people randomly together, and hopefully you get good results? And how do you fix the problem of actually trying to get people to team up and benefit from forming a clan and doing that? And honestly, I think still the solution is AI. Now, obviously, an easy counter argument is that you've got gold farmers, you got people who are trying to cheat the system, and they're not going away. Like, you're not going to get rid of these people. But maybe you could, with a little bit more AI, in trying to analyze, obviously, what is happening. I've been working with AI for at least the last 6 months, and I've learned a lot. I'm no near an expert yet on it, but I'm trying to build AI into my own software. That's one of the things that I've been working very hard on. It's one of the reasons why you don't see me streaming as much. And honestly, it's a lot of fun. We're nowhere near ready to show it off, but we're still working our way up to it. It's the ability for things to identify pattern recognition. It can get very complex, but from a simple perspective, from an application for like a business, it's very pragmatic in what we're trying to do with it. Now, a part of everything I just said could seem like a massive undertaking for the developers to build out some kind of really artificial intelligence system for you, the player. And yes, I don't see this happening in Final Fantasy XIV anytime soon. And I also don't see them making really major overhauling changes with this Alliance roulette anytime soon. That doesn't necessarily cause more frustration overall. Now, this is just the latest example of it. Earlier in the past, we saw examples where players would be, setting up a certain gear, and then they would change it in the dungeon so that they could essentially spirit bond. That back when spirit bonding was kind of the be all end all for the content itself. And so there's always going to be these problems, and I'm not trying to discourage the conversation. I'm not trying to discourage the feedback by any stretch of the imagination. I just think that when you look at it, humans are like lightning. we're going to find the path of least resistance. And once that path is found, you either need to change the pathway, but I don't think that's done much with game code. I think because humans are still going to work like they do. So you need to try to address the root issue, which is we're just trying to get in and do the content as quickly as possible, because time is our most fundamental and precious resource. And then the final argument to the whole thing, or the final thought that comes up in my mind, and again, I do apologize for this not being scripted, but the final thought is that then if you don't have time, why are you playing an MMO? And that's completely fair, right? That's completely fair. There are multiple camps. MMOs are games in a genre as a whole that actually attracts so many diverse ideas and people. And essentially, before WoW Classic launched, the question is there a market for these kind of games, these older style games, these slower based games, these games where you had to take your time, where you had to work together? It was a survive together or die alone approach, versus what we see MMOs have gone with a modern approach, where you kind of have that main single player experience, and then that opens up into a multiplayer experience. Honestly, I think I fall on leaning towards the MMO. You're going to see my excitement with 14 and 11 and games that lean in more to that communal aspect over the amazing story that is Final Fantasy XIV. And those things aren't necessarily at odds. It is like we got a full-fledged Final Fantasy game, which I've adored. I wish that with 14, they would find ways to take all that they've already done and bring it back, to bring in that variety. And I've given this idea before multiple times, and so if you've never heard it, this is it, and this will kind of conclude the video. And again, like I like to said, let me know your thoughts in the comments below, but I wish they would take some piece of content that they've already created and highlight it each week. Like in Destiny 2, they have the Nightfall Strike. In Anthem, they have the season thing right now, which that it's like every week it's this dungeon, and here's the modifiers and things like that. That kind of weekly excitement is a nice variety, and it opens up a lot of different things. And so then ultimately they would have to shift the reward structure for the Alliance raid. Why are people doing it? What should they get rewarded? Because as mechanics kind of change, as the content levels up and introduces new things that maybe a new player hasn't seen in a while, how do you keep people rewarding? How do you make that rewarding for players beyond the gameplay itself? Gameplay itself is completely rewarding for the first 5 times, 6 times, maybe 10. And then it is that a grind. I love grindy games. I'm not the one complaining here. I'm the one who's doing it. I'm just saying that if you want to address the issue, don't look at the code, look at the psychology. Okay, so that's my final thought. Thanks everybody for hanging out with me through this video. Thanks Meoni for asking the question and making your amazing video. Thanks to Hunter for Hunting for Games for continuing to feed my Final Fantasy XI craving, as I really enjoy his content. Go check both of them out. Go check out Meoni's video. And again, let's engage in this discussion and let me know your thoughts. It's not about my thoughts. It's really actually about yours. I really want to know what you're thinking about this issue. If it is an issue, if there should be anything that's done about it, or if it's just, yeah, it is what it is, and maybe you're either engaging in it or you're not. I'd love to know any and all thoughts in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I love you very much. Hope you have an amazing evening, day, week, and whatever month. Happy 2020, everybody. And I'll see you in my next video. Take care.